30 years in the Marine Corps is a long time. The Marine Corps certainly gets its fair share over that time, but there is so much that the Marine Corps gives back in return. You know, things like back problems and chronic knee pain and a little tinnitus and the ability to sleep anywhere at any time. In exchange for leading some of the most badass people you will ever meet, being part of the best fighting force in the world, and this incredible bookshelf, documenting all of those 30 years. Okay, before we get too deep into this, let's go to the legal stuff. The views and opinions presented in the entirety of this video are those of the author and do not represent the views of the Department of Defense or Armed Forces. Appearance of or reference to any commercial products or services, external hyperlinks, or linked websites does not constitute the endorsement of those products or services therein. Okay, thanks. I was really excited when the command I'm currently stationed at asked me to build this as a 30-year retirement gift for our commanding officer. From that last sentence, you can probably make the valid assumption that I'm also in the Marine Corps, but I currently only have 10 years in. I can only imagine having 3 times that amount of time in, so it was a little daunting when I was asked. I knew this project had to go above and beyond. It actually wasn't me who came up with the idea for this. Hey, I have to give credit where credit is due, right? The chief of staff at the command came to me knowing I build furniture, but she also knew the commanding officer very well after working with him for so long, and knows that he loves reading and has a ton of books. Okay, perfect. Bookshelf it is. But how can you summarize 30 years in the Marine Corps with a bookshelf? Well, actually, pretty simply. And she had the perfect idea. I'll explain if you'll allow me to throw some military knowledge your way for a second. Every 3 years or so in the military, you move, or what we call a permanent change of station, or PCS. So when you PCS, yes, it's a verb, you transfer from one unit to another. That 3 years or so goes by and you PCS again, and so on and so forth. If you have heard of the term military brat, that's a term for kids of parents in the military, and as a child, growing up you live in about 10 different places by the time you're 16 years old. Okay, so you're probably thinking 30 years, 3 years each duty station, so 10 units, right? Well, not exactly. It could be more. There's schools you could go to, or within those 3 years, you could have jobs at 2 different units in the same general area, which is what we call a permanent change of assignment, or PCA. So you could easily end up at well more than 10 units during a 30-year career. In fact, our commanding officer was part of 17 units during his whole time in the Marine Corps. But why is this important at all to the design of this bookshelf? Well, it goes into how to incorporate 30 years of service into this. Each unit that you go to has a unit logo, and the idea was to add the unit logos of each of the 17 units he has been a part of in chronological order along the front of the shelves. How, you ask? Well, before building furniture, I did mainly a lot of CNC work and laser engraving, so this was an easy problem to solve. Originally, I tried CNCing the logos into the walnut, but that was a disaster. The logos are way too detailed for engraving, but very easy for lasering. Okay, so laser engraving it is. But if you've ever tried to laser engrave walnut before, nothing shows up very well. So I needed a wood that would laser engrave well and look good with walnut. Insert YouTube's favorite wood combination: walnut and white oak. Okay, it's settled then. Walnut bookshelf with white oak inlaid laser engraved unit logos in chronological order. Let's do this. So up until this point, you've seen me make a bunch of panels. I obviously haven't shown all of them, but now I'm at a total of 5 panels, 3 for each of the shelves and 2 for the sides. However, this is where I found myself in a bit of a bind. So I messed up a little bit in my original design. So let me show you what I'm looking at. This is my original design that I have with all the logos in front on both this top shelf and the bottom shelf. EGA's name is going to go right here, start date, end date, all that kind of stuff. But so there's a lot to go on the front of this bookshelf. And I originally designed it to be 28.5 inches. Okay. There's all these files. I have all these files in order to fit onto here. I think there's 18 logos total, 19, something like that. As I'm going in Aspire to figure out the spacing and everything of the files that I already made, and I'm getting cut. So this is 28.5 inches. It's not nearly enough space for the amount of logos that I need to put onto the front of this shelf. So what I did is I am changing the design to now be 34 inches in length in order to fit all of these logos. You can see on the top shelf too, this is 28.5. I got to change this to 34, and then it's all nice and spaced out. Looks good. However, none of my panels at this point are anywhere close to 34 inches. So I need to go back down to the shop and see, okay, what can I do to add another 6 or so inches onto my panels in order to make this actually fit. So I've got my 28-inch shelf here, and what I'm going to do to make it the 34 inches that I need are add some end caps to the end of my shelf, just like this. But instead of leaving the seams plain like this, just walnut to walnut, what I'm actually going to do is leave a slight gap in there and take 2 strips of oak and place it right in between these two. So I'm going to actually be highlighting the seam in between the original shelf and the end caps. And these pieces of white oak will match the inlays of the unit logos on the front of the shelf, so this won't look like a mistake at all. It will actually look like it's been part of the design this whole time. So you'll see me glue this up in 2 parts here. Once to glue the thin strip of oak and then the walnut end caps. It may seem weird that I didn't glue it all up at once, but this joint here between the oak and the walnut is rather weak, and saying the weight of the books will cause a lot of tension on this joint, I thought it would be best to add a couple of dominoes. Would it have probably been fine with just the glue joint? Yeah, probably. But that's the nice thing about the domino. It takes about 5 minutes to add these to all the end caps, and now I know for certain that this joint will take the weight of all the books that can fit on these shelves. I'll give 5 minutes any day for a little peace of mind. Now that I've got all 3 shelves glued up, time to take these 2, almost dropped that. Time to turn these 2 larger panels into the legs. So I've got my tool paths all set up for each leg, and this is actually way too big for my CNC. Not way too big, it's about 2-3 inches too big. But I'm just gonna cut out the USMC and this design down here and the little gap to make the 2 legs. And then otherwise the outline and everything I'm gonna do on either on the table saw or the chop saw. Did you know the Marine Corps was founded in a bar? That's right, back in 1693, 2 colonists from England, Joshua Carpenter and his brother Samuel, opened themselves a brewery in Philadelphia along the waterfront of the Delaware River, located on the corner of Water Street and Tun Alley. Thus, the bar got its name, the Tun Tavern. Tun also stands for barrel in Old English, which is still rather fitting. The brothers were so good at brewing beer that it attracted colonists from everywhere and quickly gained popularity. Even though master brewer Joshua Carpenter met his death in 1722, ownership of the bar changed hands but still gathered lots of attention. Prominent politicians, founding fathers, and members of the Continental Congress all raised their glasses at Tun Tavern. And then it happened. On November 10th, 1775, the Second Continental Congress commissioned Samuel Nicholas to raise 2 battalions of Marines to fight in the Revolutionary War. Samuel Nicholas, whom we can safely assume frequented Tun Tavern, made his friend and then proprietor of Tun Tavern, Robert Mullen, the first ever recruiter of the Marines. And the Tun Tavern then became the first ever recruiting station. If you wanted to be a Marine in 1775, you went to the corner of Water Street and Tun Alley. Now with the main body of the bookshelf all done, it's time to focus on the engravings. In order to get the laser engraving and CNC cutout to be exactly right, it takes a good amount of proper planning. Most of this prep is all behind the scenes, though. First off, it takes a while to get all these logos vectorized and ready for the laser software. I typically have someone else convert the files since it takes way too long for me to do it, and it's well worth the dollars and cents to have someone else do it. But once I get those files done, there's still more prep, as I still need to create the tool paths for both the laser and the CNC. Once the files are all done though, I can bring it to the CNC with the laser attachment on and laser the logos, which is what you just saw me do. But here comes the most important part. I need to make sure I zero the CNC cutter head to the exact same zero as I did the laser. Otherwise, logos would be off-center, or I end up cutting through the middle of the logo. To do this, I engrave a corner 0 using the laser, and then take my most fine-tipped CNC bit I have and match the zeros as precisely as possible. Once I program the correct 0 into the CNC, I'll switch out the bit for the proper one to make all the cuts. Thankfully, I've done this enough now that it's almost second nature, the order of operations that I need to go through in order to make all of this work. But it definitely did not start out that way. I have certainly made my fair share of mistakes in the past. With the logos engraved, it's time to cut the pockets for the logos to sit in for the front of the shelves. This wasn't without a bit of trial and error. What's not seen is me cutting out a bunch of different size pockets, testing tolerances for the inlay. Again, I've been doing this long enough, I know roughly where to start and the tolerances of my machine, so I was able to quickly determine the offset needed in order for these inlays to fit perfectly. Then I was able to set the offset for all of the logos and hit go. Once that was done, it was a very easy glue up from there. I'm really glad I send pictures to clients while I'm working on their respective projects. The chief of staff caught a pretty big mistake I made after I had sent her a picture of what I thought was the final logo layout. But I was wrong. I accidentally used the incorrect unit logo for one of the units, and of course, silly me, I sent this to her after I had set all the inlays. So here I am trying to chisel out the inlay, yeah right, then finally using my brain and cutting out a template on my CNC and using a template bit on my router to remove the old one. I got lucky and the new unit logo was also a circle, so it was as easy as lasering the new logo and gluing in the new one. Yeah, this was a pain to correct, but thank goodness she caught it. That would have been extremely embarrassing, gifting this on the day of his retirement with the wrong unit logo on there. And unless the chief of staff and retiring officer watch this video, I never actually told them that I made this swap. Well, secret's out now. Just like I highlighted the seam from the walnut end caps with a piece of oak, I decided to do the same for the seam in between the shelf and the shelf front where the inlays are. This was an easy addition as I cut some thin strips of oak just like I did for the end caps and glued those onto the front of the shelves. This is another small addition that does a couple of things for this piece. First, it adds very simple design elements that enhance the overall look, but secondly, it goes even further in hiding my original design flaw of not making the bookcase wide enough for all the logos, making it look like these oak accents were part of the piece all along. This is why I like staying flexible in my build process, but also love it when my clients give me creative freedom to make the best decisions for the product. I'm constantly trying to improve my creative eye and design style, and something like this gives me the confidence to intentionally add features like this in future projects, even though this go around my creative eye was a bit serendipitous. One good part about the fronts of these shelves is I didn't have to use dominoes like I did the side end caps. This joint won't be holding any weight, so just using the glue will be plenty strong enough. However, looking back on it, it may have been a good idea after all. Getting the alignment just right took some time and made the glue up a bit more stressful than I wanted it to be, and I could have alleviated that by using a couple of dominoes. But this bookshelf is starting to come together really nicely. I have all the larger pieces done, and now it's onto final assembly. Maybe some of you are thinking at this point, wow, this is really excessive for a retirement gift. Truthfully, it's not. And don't worry, the Marine Corps doesn't pay for retirement gifts, and nobody's tax dollars are going towards this bookshelf. And also, I didn't make any money on this either. What I received barely covered materials, and then factor in all the other supplies I used, I maybe broke even. But that's not the point at all. We at the command pool funds together from our personal dollars, or in my case, time and a shop full of tools, in order to honor someone who has literally spent their entire adult lifetime serving the country and his fellow Marines. And to us, it's all well worth it to pay our respects. With final assembly underway, I figured I'd hit you with one more bit of Marine Corps knowledge. Every year since November 10th, 1775, when the Marine Corps was born in that very ton tavern, Marines around the world celebrate with a Marine Corps birthday ball, where everyone attending dresses to the nines and enjoys the night celebrating our heritage, our plethora of traditions, and obviously a drink or several if, that's your thing. And yes, we even have birthday cake. But sorry to say, no crayons. Although orange is by far the best flavor. So next time November 10th rolls around, wish a Marine a happy birthday. Yes, we do that. Call it quirky or whatever you like, but it's what we do. We're Marines. If you've enjoyed this video, we'd love for you to join our growing community. Please hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more unique woodworking projects and stories. And if you made it all the way to the end, drop Ton Tavern in the comments below. As a special thank you, I'll give you a shout out in our next video. We appreciate your support, and it truly helps us grow our channel and our business. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.